that appeared on the guide stones recently. These, like I said earlier, that these guys have to state what their agenda is, because when there's no reaction, that gives them the mandate. But what is occurring is starting to wake people up. Evidence here. Things are accelerating at a phenomenal rate of knots. And just in case you think that, well, that's just the work of a few crazies, this is a guy called Dr. Eric Pianka, as a professor of zoology, and 3.5 years ago he gave a presentation at the University of Texas. And this is a report from that. In April 2006, a top scientist gave a speech to the Texas Academy of Science in which he advocated the need to exterminate 90% of the population through the airborne Ebola virus. Dr. Eric Pianka's chilling comments and their enthusiastic reception again underscore the elite's agenda to enact horrifying measures of population control. Pianka's speech was ordered to be kept off the record before it began. Apparently, he got an insider and he got a standing ovation. Close to the home, Prince Philip, husband and consort to the Queen of England, in 1988, in an interview with Deutsche Press, he said, "In the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus, in order to contribute something to solve overpopulation." He actually wrote something very similar in a book that he published the same year. This is a quote that Senator Gary Hart actually made in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. He said, "Americans will most likely die on American soil, possibly in large numbers." Now, when I heard that, I knew that I'd read that somewhere before. I knew it wasn't original. Now, it did take me a while to actually find the document, but it actually came from another right-wing think tank report, the Hart-Rubman US Commission on National Security, where they said Americans will most likely die on American soil, possibly in large numbers. And they were making the observation in context of pursuing American hegemony, an agenda which has been spelled out in literally words of one syllable by right-wing think tanks and certain individuals since the 1960s, late 1950s, early 1960s. A couple of documents you might want to take a look at. One is the report from Iron Mountain, which was put together in 1963, made public in 1967. It's dismissed by a lot of people as forgery. Yet, Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote a book in 1969, published in 1970, called Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era. Now, Brzezinski, knowing that this report was made public, was either a member of the Iron Mountain team and decided that because it was now public, he could freely quote from it, or he just decided it was a bloody good report, and he could plagiarize from it and incorporate some of the ideas into his thinking. And in the book, he talks about, it's extremely depressing, because he talks about moving with technology to the point where all humanity is surveilled 24 hours a day, and every transaction undertaken by any individual on the planet is instantly accessible. He's effectively taking 1984 and putting it into practice. Now, at a recent event in the UK, the AV3 event, there's a guy called Greg Nicoletis, who I brought over from Australia. Because Greg Nicoletis, in my opinion, is a young man, a nutritionist by profession, but he is the most advanced in terms of his research on the microchipping agenda. And he runs a website called We the People Will Not Be Chipped. Now, this is the DVD, there's a few copies outside of that presentation, and it was the highlight of the weekend, because it was the most original presentation of the weekend. And what you see in there in terms of where technology's at, in terms of microchipping, and Greg's prognosis of the game plan for microchipping, we need to be aware. We need to be aware so that we can be business. But Americans will most likely die on American soil, possibly in large numbers. He's absolutely right, but not in the way in which perhaps he initially intended. In the US alone, there are over 106,000 deaths every year from properly prescribed pharmaceutical drugs taken exactly as directed. In addition, approximately another 150,000 people will die every year as a result of other medical blunders, making deaths caused by doctors one of the leading causes, some would say the leading cause of death in the USA. But there is some divine justice. Do you know what profession in the US has the shortest life expectancy? Doctors. Because they believe the bullshit that the pharmaceutical companies give them and tell them. You know, the doctors in the US and certainly the UK, I'll leave you to make your own judgment about Belgium, but certainly the UK, they have become nothing more than the front desk of the pharmaceutical companies. And of course, who controls the financing for a lot of the university medical courses? Yeah, it's the pharmaceutical companies. And now in the UK, the pharmaceutical companies are trying to sponsor state schools. I mean, yeah, ready-made population for testing. In the decade 1990 to 2000, about 7.8 million victims suffered death from properly prescribed and properly implemented medications, making Big Pharma actually the #1 killer on the planet. So Big Pharma kills more people than the US military, and by God, the US military tried. They like being in second place. In the US, automobile accidents and police and civilian firearm incidents, the numbers are staggering. It's roughly the same number. And the last year I have was only 2002, and it was 52,000 people were killed on the roads in the US, and slightly less, but still over 50,000 were killed by police and civilian firearm incidents. Terrorism. Terrorism is so far down the league table, it's just unreal. But nonetheless, that's what we're all sort of supposed to believe, that all the restrictions on our freedom, all the legislation that's being implemented, like the Patriot Act in the US, the Civil Contingencies Bill in the UK, all of these are to guarantee our freedom and liberty, when in reality they do completely the opposite. It's a wonderful game of smoke and mirrors. So, what I'm telling you is in the public domain. It's freely accessible information. So why don't we know about this? Because these guys have become very, very good at distraction. Very good. You know, in the UK we have this program, we have two programs, X Factor, some of you may be familiar with it, X Factor and Strictly Come Dancing. More people voted on these two programs than voted in the recent EU election. And of course the scriptwriters go, oh, what a result. Yeah, we've got them because we've got them hooked on bullshit TV. Meaningless TV. And the tragedy is that most of us are actually not the target for all this. They're not actually too concerned about our generation. Fortunately, there are a few exceptions in the audience, actually. What they're really targeting is the youth, the children and the youth. We're beyond capture. We have perhaps the last modicum of critical, independent thought. What is being developed by dumbing down the education system, by feeding crap to our kids on TV, we are turning the next generation into robotic automatons. The US really has a problem, the UK has a problem in terms of falling education standards. I mean, it's horrendous. Quality teachers are leaving the profession at a phenomenal rate of knots because they're just appalled by what they're being told to teach. And we've got the phenomenal rise in pumping drugs like Ritalin. Now, Ritalin is a drug that the pharmacologists don't actually understand how it works because it's actually a stimulant. It's like cocaine. But for some reason, in the young brain, it has the opposite effect. In the US, 10% of all school-aged children are taking Ritalin at any given time. 40% of all school-aged children are either on Ritalin or have taken Ritalin at some juncture. In the UK, in 2007, the British government spent £28 million on Ritalin. Some of the more experienced teachers are saying, please, please, please don't give your kids Ritalin. Let's get back to good old-fashioned parenting. But of course, in addition, we have a lot of nutritionists who have rightly pointed out that the junk food that we're feeding young people today which is devoid of nutrition, devoid of vitamins, devoid of minerals, might as well feed them cardboard, is taking a significant toll on the behaviour and the attention span of our youth. And so we rectify it by pumping them full of Ritalin. And the effects of Ritalin are extremely well documented now. Self-harming, suicide, and take down this website, because this is one of the most remarkable databases that you will find on the web. And this is the database of teen suicides, self-harming, school shootings, other atrocities that have occurred, and guess what the common denominator is? Ritalin. In all cases, the young people were either on Ritalin or in the process of coming off Ritalin. In the UK, in South Wales, about 18 months ago, there were a cluster of suicides. And the government refused to initiate an inquiry of any description. Now, a few independent scientists tried to take a look at it, and there's two hypotheses that have been put forward. One is that all of the teen suicides live within 250 metres of play mast. It's a hypothesis. It's not proven because the study wasn't permitted to be continued. And the other common denominator was all of the youths were either on Ritalin or had been on a course of Ritalin. So we're screwing up the minds of the kids big time. These drugs are taking them places they have no reason to go. But it's all part of the control agenda. Turning the kids into zombies, but it's all part of the nursery to get the adult population onto the adult versions, such as Prozac and other antidepressants. And this is becoming horrendous, as you'll see in a second. And in the UK, more and more people are becoming very concerned about the elderly relatives. Again, what happened to our culture where one generation took care of the next as they entered into old age? Traditionally, if unfortunately they became unable to take care of themselves, then the generation below, sons and daughters, will take it upon themselves to look after their kids. Well, no more. You shunt them off into a nursing home, which is a euphemism for a prison, where they get put under the chemical cosh. Well, some of these nursing homes, and in the UK, by the way, you are not, if you own a house and you go into a nursing home, you have to sell your house and use the money to fund the nursing home. And the cost of these nursing homes, in a lot of cases, is like £500 a day. £500 a day! Well, I was talking to my dad a few months ago, and both my parents are still alive. They're both in their 80s. And I said, you know what, Dad? I said, you are never going into a nursing home. And he went, oh, thank you very much. You're going to take care of us? I said, no. I said, I've got a cruise brochure here, and I've calculated that I can put you on a world cruise, a continuous world cruise, for £220 a day.